At Pope Francis' funeral, everyone suddenly remembered an episode that happened almost 10 years ago. Once, during a historic meeting with Queen Elizabeth II, the Pope gave her a special gift. But it wasn't for her, it was for the newborn Prince George. At the time, no one thought much of it. People assumed it was just a kind and symbolic gesture. However, now that Pope Francis has passed away, the world has finally uncovered the hidden meaning behind that gift. It wasn't just a present, it was a secret message to the British crown and to the entire world. What exactly did the Pope give the Queen that day in the Vatican? And what mysterious meaning did he leave behind? What was once a quiet secret is now clear to everyone, and this revelation could change the course of history. Pope Francis passed away on April 21, 2025. He was 88 years old. For 12 years, he led the Catholic Church, but honestly, he was so much more than just a religious leader. The whole world saw him as a symbol of kindness, humility, and hope. When news of his death came, it felt like the end of an era. People didn't just lose a pope, they lost a man who always stood up for the poor, spoke about peace, and reminded leaders to care about people, not just power. His funeral was held in St. Peter's Square, and over 200,000 people gathered to say their goodbyes. Can you imagine? Leaders from all over the world came. Presidents, kings, queens, princes. It was a moment when politics, faith, and tradition all stood still to honor one man. And of course, the royal families were there. Almost every European monarchy sent someone to pay their respects. Let me tell you who was there, because it wasn't just a formal visit. You could see real emotion on their faces. First, King Felipe VI and Queen Letizia of Spain. They arrived early in the morning, standing quietly in front of the Pope's casket. You could feel the weight of the moment. They had met Pope Francis several times before, since they were still Prince and Princess of Asturias. Spain never got to host the Pope, but their bond was strong. After his death, Felipe sent heartfelt condolences and even signed the Book of Mourning with Queen Sophia. Then there was Queen Mary of Denmark. She came alone because King Frederick was on an official trip to Japan. Mary sat in the front row, dressed in strict black, following every tradition. She had met the Pope back in 2018, so for her it was personal. From Sweden, King Carl Gustaf and Queen Sylvia came too. Queen Sylvia wore a traditional black mantilla, very elegant but also so respectful. They spoke warmly about Pope Francis, remembering his visit to Lund, where Catholics and Lutherans came together in a rare moment of unity. Crown Prince Haakon and Princess Mette-Marit represented Norway. It was touching to see Mette-Marit there. Despite her health struggles, she made the trip, dressed in black with a mantilla. It showed how important this farewell was. The Grand Duke Henry and Grand Duchess Maria Theresa of Luxembourg were also present. You could see they were deeply moved. Luxembourg had a close relationship with the Vatican, and the Pope had even met their grandchildren during his visit in 2023, and then Prince William, he came alone, without Kate. It was symbolic. His father, King Charles, had known Pope Francis well, but now it was William's turn to step forward as a future king, just like Queen Elizabeth once sent Charles to Pope John Paul II's funeral. Now William was standing there, representing not just his family, but the whole UK. From Monaco, Prince Albert and Princess Charlene took their seats, both dressed in black. Monaco even declared 3 days of mourning after the Pope's death. That's how much they respected him. Albert spoke beautifully about the Pope's message of love and justice. Even King Abdullah II and Queen Rania of Jordan were there. Of course, Jordan isn't a Catholic country, but that didn't matter. They came out of deep respect. Queen Rania, veiled in black, called Pope Francis the People's Pope. She remembered how much he cared for refugees and children affected by war. The The Belgian royals, King Philippe and Queen Mathilde, also came to say goodbye. They remembered his humility and how he always thought about those less fortunate, and there were others too, like Emanuele Filiberto of Savoy and Prince Carlo of Bourbon-Two Sicilies. They represent old royal houses, but they still came to honor a man who transcended titles and time. It was such a powerful scene, royals from across Europe and even beyond, united in grief and respect. But before we reveal the truth, let me share something useful with you. Did you know you can now check your pulse using just your iPhone camera? With the Heartscape app, it's never been easier to monitor your health. Simply place your finger on the camera and in a few seconds you'll get a detailed analysis of your heart rate and overall condition. Taking care of your health has never been easier or faster. Download Heartscape from the App Store right now and stay in tune with your heart. You know, saying goodbye to a pope isn't like any other funeral. There are rules, very old, very strict rules. And when it comes to royals, every detail matters. It's not just about showing up, it's about showing deep respect through how you present yourself. Pope Francis's funeral at the Vatican was a carefully orchestrated ceremony where every detail mattered, including how royalty from across the globe were expected to present themselves. At St. Peter's Square, the dress code was clear, black or dark colors only, no bright shades, no bold statements. Women had to wear long or knee-length dresses with long sleeves, simple, elegant, but modest. Jewelry? Only the most discreet pieces, no diamonds sparkling in the sun, no flashy necklaces. Pearls were the safest choice. Timeless and respectful, just like Queen Sophia wore when she attended Pope John Paul II's funeral years ago. And of course, there's the mantilla, that delicate black lace veil many royal women wore over their heads. You could see Queen Sylvia of Sweden and Princess Mette-Marie of Norway following this tradition. It's such a graceful yet somber look. It tells everyone, I'm here not as a queen or a princess, but as a woman paying her respects. But here's something curious. Have you ever heard of the privilege of white? It's a secret little rule from the Vatican that allows a select few royal women to wear white in front of the Pope. Yes, white, the color only the Pope usually wears. Queens like Letizia of Spain, Sophia, Mathilde of Belgium, and Charlene of Monaco have this honor, but only during private audiences or special non-formal events. At a funeral, absolutely not. Even those privileged queens had to follow the same tradition as everyone else. Black, simple, respectful. So no, Queen Letizia didn't appear in white this time, even though she had worn it before during visits to the Vatican. Shoes. Oh, even that was regulated. No high heels, no open toes, just simple closed shoes. Because at a moment like this, elegance comes from humility, not fashion. When you looked across the rows of royals that day, everyone followed the same unspoken rule. Leave titles, crowns, and status behind. They weren't there to shine, they were there to mourn. What an interesting and dramatic fact! Just a few days before Pope Francis's death, King Charles and his wife Camilla met with him. It wasn't a planned event. In fact, everyone believed the meeting had been cancelled because the Pope was too ill to receive visitors. He had just survived a dangerous battle with pneumonia, spending weeks in the hospital. Charles himself wasn't in perfect health either. He was still fighting cancer. But suddenly, while Charles and Camilla were in Italy celebrating their 20th wedding anniversary, the Vatican announced that Pope Francis wanted to see them privately. No cameras, no speeches, just a quiet moment between three people who had seen the weight of the world on their shoulders. The meeting lasted only about 20 minutes, but imagine what can be said in those few minutes when two powerful figures know that time is running out. The Pope wished them a happy anniversary and thanked them for coming. There was even an exchange of gifts. Charles was seen holding a small red box when he left. What was inside? No one knows, and maybe we never will. Some say this meeting was just a polite gesture, but others believe it was something symbolic, a final conversation where Pope Francis may have shared thoughts or advice meant to guide Charles as a king, or even left him a hidden message. We can only guess, but one thing is certain: it was no coincidence that they saw each other just days before the Pope's passing. And if that wasn't enough, people started to remember another royal visit to the Vatican, one that carried an even deeper, almost sacred meaning. Back in 2014, Queen Elizabeth II herself met with Pope Francis. It was a historic moment. Two of the world's most respected figures, both symbols of tradition and faith. And during that meeting, something unusual happened, but we'll get to that soon. Queen Elizabeth II lived longer and ruled longer than most leaders of her time. She saw presidents, kings, and prime ministers come and go, but there was one type of meeting that always stood out: her audiences with the popes. Across her 70-year reign, she met 5 different popes. No other monarch in British history had such a unique connection with the Vatican. These weren't casual visits or just diplomatic formalities. Every meeting was carefully arranged, full of symbolism, tradition, and quiet messages that only 2 such figures could truly understand. It all began in 1951. Elizabeth wasn't even queen yet. She was still a young princess when she met Pope Pius XII in Rome. Can you imagine a 25-year-old woman already preparing for a lifetime of duty, standing before the Pope? He praised her for carrying such a heavy responsibility with grace and dignity. Little did they know, just a year later she would wear the crown. Then in 1961, as queen, she met Pope John XXIII at the Apostolic Palace. The Pope expressed his deep personal respect for her. It wasn't about religion. It was about 2 leaders acknowledging the burdens they both carried. But her most frequent encounters were with Pope John Paul II. They met 3 times, first in 1980 at the Vatican, then during his historic visit to Britain in 1982, the first time a pope ever stepped foot in the UK, and again in 2000. Each time they exchanged gifts and warm words. It was clear they shared mutual respect despite representing different churches. In 2010, Queen Elizabeth welcomed Pope Benedict XVI to Scotland. It was his first meeting during his visit to the UK. They didn't just talk about formalities. They shared concerns about the world, about keeping Christian values alive in modern society. It was a thoughtful, sincere conversation between 2 people who had seen the world change around them. And then came 2014, her final meeting, and perhaps the most mysterious one. Speaking of royal traditions, have you ever wondered what Europe's royal families enjoy at their dinner tables? You can discover the secrets of royal cuisine in a new book, Elegant Main Dishes, a cookbook inspired by Europe's royal families. It's a collection of main course recipes adapted for everyday cooking, but with a touch of royal elegance. Simple, delicious, and perfect for anyone who wants to bring a bit of royal charm to their meals. The book is now available on Amazon in both Kindle and hardcover versions. Get your copy today and prepare a meal truly fit for a queen. It was a bright spring day in Rome, April 3rd, 2014. The wisteria was blooming and Queen Elizabeth II arrived at the Vatican wearing a soft lilac coat and matching hat. perfectly in tune with the season. But this wasn't just another royal visit. There was something special in the air. The Queen wasn't alone. Prince Philip was by her side, as always. They were about 20 minutes late, but when you're having a lovely lunch with Italy's president, who could blame them? Smiling politely, the Queen greeted Pope Francis with a simple, "Sorry to keep you waiting. We were having a very pleasant lunch." Pope Francis, ever warm and informal, welcomed them in English. "Welcome." And just like that, two of the world's most iconic figures sat down for a private chat. No cameras, no microphones, just under 20 minutes behind closed doors, with only an interpreter to help them bridge languages and traditions. What they talked about, no one knows. The Vatican kept it quiet, as always, but sometimes silence says more than words. Then came the traditional exchange of gifts. But this time it was far from ordinary. Queen Elizabeth, always thoughtful, brought a charming wicker basket filled with treats from the royal estates. There was honey from her own garden at Buckingham Palace. She smiled as she told the Pope, "I hope that is unusual for you." Alongside the honey was a bottle of Balmoral whiskey, which, to be honest, made Pope Francis raise his eyebrows in surprise when Prince Philip proudly held it up. There was also cider and even a dozen eggs. It felt more like a friendly gesture between neighbors than a formal diplomatic offering. But then, Pope Francis did something unexpected. Instead of giving the Queen a typical Vatican medal or a framed blessing, like many would expect, he handed her a small stone orb topped with a sharp cross, and with a warm smile he said it was for El Niñito, his affectionate way of saying the little one. That little one was, of course, Prince George, the Queen's great-grandson, who was just 8 months old at the time. The Queen looked at the unusual gift and chuckled softly. "He will be thrilled by that when he's a little older." Everyone in the room smiled. It seemed like a sweet symbolic gesture from the Pope to the future generation of the British royal family. But here's where things get interesting. Back then, it seemed like nothing more than tradition. It was just a polite exchange, or so it seemed. Now, after Pope Francis' passing, people are looking back at that moment with fresh eyes. Why that gift? Why Prince George? And why did Pope Francis choose something so symbolic? A stone orb with a cross, instead of a simple toy or blessing. Some believe it wasn't just a present, it was a message, a quiet spiritual reminder for the future king. But only now do we truly understand what that moment meant. That day in Rome ended as calmly as it began. The Queen and Prince Philip continued their visit, fulfilling an obligation she had postponed the year before due to illness. She didn't like leaving promises unfinished. That's why she was determined to meet Pope Francis. Now that Pope Francis has passed, a simple moment from 2014 has taken on an entirely new meaning. What once seemed like a charming gesture, a small gift for baby Prince George, is now seen as something far more profound. The object he gave wasn't random, it was a globus cruciger, a sphere topped with a cross, rich in history and symbolism. For centuries, this emblem has stood as a powerful reminder that all earthly power is subject to a higher divine authority. It wasn't just a beautiful item, it was a message carved in tradition. This symbol isn't unfamiliar to the British royal family. During every coronation, the monarch holds the sovereign's orb, carrying almost the exact same meaning. It serves as a silent promise that the crown is not just a symbol of rule but of duty under God's watchful eye. It speaks of humility, not control, of service, not supremacy. So when Pope Francis placed this symbol in Queen Elizabeth's hands, destined for her great-grandson, it was more than a diplomatic exchange. It was a thoughtful reminder, directed at a future king, about what true leadership should stand for. A quiet nudge that titles alone do not define greatness. Pope Francis was never a man of empty gestures. Throughout his life, he employed simple acts and symbols to convey profound truths. He didn't rely on grand declarations. Instead, he believed that small, meaningful actions could inspire reflection and change hearts. This gift was a perfect example of that philosophy. Back then, few noticed the depth behind this offering, but as mourners gathered in St. Peter's Square, surrounded by royalty and dignitaries, people began to reflect. It became clear that Pope Francis had left behind more than memories. He had left thoughtful reminders of the values he held dear. Today, that modest orb given to Prince George stands as part of his enduring legacy. It's not wrapped in mystery or hidden prophecy. It's a clear and timeless symbol. A quiet lesson passed down, showing that those born into privilege carry a responsibility far greater than themselves. And perhaps that's why, in remembering this gift, many were struck by its meaning. In a world often blinded by status and power, Pope Francis offered something different, a call to lead with humility, faith, and compassion. In the end, that may have been his most powerful message, not just for a young prince, but for anyone willing to listen. Was this simple gift a quiet lesson for future generations, or simply a kind gesture? What's your take? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching.